What up, player profiler faithful? It's Matty Kiwoom. Welcome to the latest episode of The Game Plan. Today's episode is for everyone, all your contending teams, all your rebuilds, because we're going to start off the show talking about the 2024 rookie class. A bit of an overview. I'm not going to really dive too far into the weeds. A little overview of my strategy in terms of rookie picks, how to handle them here in the coming months. A little overview of the class in general, of what I've seen so far, and then I'll go position by position, highlight one player, and maybe a sleeper pick or something of that nature. So we're going to do the overview. If you've already done your research, if you've already started to talk rookies in 2024, go check out the Futurecast. Me and Theo Greminger. We have had now 4 episodes this season. The latest episode was with Cody Carpentier, returning host of the Futurecast, came aboard to do a 2024 rookie mock. So if you want to get really into the weeds, check that out. But we had John Laube, Matt Hicks, Anand Dury, from right here, Player Profiler, talking about rookies over the last few months. So if you're already in, if you're in the rookie space, your head's there already, go check out the Futurecast. But if you're looking for, just get those toes wet. Just dip them toes in, start getting to know the 2024 class. Today's episode's for you, and then stick around because, of course, I'll be diving right on into that bargain bin, finding some sleepers if you are in desperate need of help to get a win in Week 13. So, ladies, gentlemen, children of all ages, all the game planners out there, get out your pens and your pads, and let's start game planning to get those Week 13 dubs. No guest today. Me, Matty Kiwoom, running solo dolo. There is a guest on the schedule for next weekend, but today you just got me, the OG here at Play. OG at Play for. No, I'm not Matt Kelly. I'm not the Podfather. I'm Matt Kiwoom, and I am the OG of the game planner here. So let's dive right in. We're talking 2024 rookies. Before I go on this crazy tangent, my mind goes, who knows where? We got Cousins-giving today, so I'm already in my pajamas, wearing the DJ Moore jersey for some flavor. So, it's going to be a good day. But anyway, let's talk about 2024 rookies. First, I want to talk about my strategy in regards to rookie picks. How I've attacked owning them, getting them, stashing them, or hoarding them, however you want to call it, for some of my contenders and some of my rebuilds, some of the teams I'm looking for the future. Your trade deadline may have passed. This is probably more of a off-season approach, or as we call it at Player Profile, the Dynasty in-season approach to acquiring picks and hoarding picks, stuff of that nature. In-season's a little different. You're looking to win now. Your team's winning now, so I'm not really going to talk about that. This is for the coming months more in general. And for my contending teams, what I have done is I have gone out and tried to grab as many seconds and thirds as I possibly can in my rookie drafts. Because they are obviously coming a little bit cheaper value than the firsts. If you're a contender, taking your first, getting a player that helps you win in 2023, plus their second next year, their third next year, seems, that's kind of been my approach there. And when I get into the class overview, you'll know exactly why. But I think contending teams should try to get get a third back in return, get a second back in return. Even if you're trying to buy into a superstar, overpay a little bit. But hey, you know what? Since I'm so gracious here this holiday season, since I've graced you with an improvement in my offer, I am sending you more assets, better assets. Why don't you go ahead and toss your boy or a second or a third? So I'm trying to gather up those seconds and thirds if I'm a contender. And then if you are looking to rebuild, certain... there people like to retool. Some people like to rebuild on the fly, however you want to call it. Some people like to go scorched earth, tear it all down, trade everything for future assets. If you're in that mode, you got to do what you got to do to get 2, 3, 4 firsts. You want to just have a bevy of round 1 picks at your disposal heading into 2024. The value of them right now may be at a bit of a premium. And talking about, if your trade deadline hasn't passed, then obviously rebuilders are valuing firsts like insane. So this might be the wait a little bit, and then you might the market for first might become a little bit more calm, not as inflated in a few months after in the Dynasty in season. So I'd wait, but I'm still going after them. You need them. You need to dive on. Take seconds for sure. For sure, you want picks, but It's paramount. This going into 2024, it is paramount. Write this down. This is paramount. It is so important for our rebuilding rosters to have multiple 2024 firsts. Now, if you were in a dynasty startup this year, like I was in a handful of them. What I did was I just kept trading back throughout so I could acquire 2024 firsts, because you're going to want these nukes, these bullets, this ammunition to your roster, because the 2024 class is loaded. So this gets me to my next point, the 2024 class overview as it sits now. I am assuming Caleb Williams declares for the draft and Marvin Harrison Jr. declares for the draft. They're both playing a little bit of that Brett Favre, we'll call it, approach. Will he, won't he enter the draft? Does he want to go back to school? Both players, you could make an argument why they would want to go back to school. Caleb Williams has always, perpetually underdelivered in terms of his team's performance, his late season bowl appearances, all that stuff. So he might want to prove a little something at USC. And Marvin Harrison Jr., let's face it, his dad was an NFL player. He knows more about the life and what comes with it and how he's approached it. And he may look at it like, I need to beat Michigan before I go to the NFL. The NFL will be there. He's going to make upwards of $10 million if he goes back to Ohio State, given the NIL deals and that structure. Same with Caleb. He'll make double-digit in the millions. And, they're sitting there seeing the horrible Patriots, and maybe they're both saying to themselves, hey, let's go back to college. Let's do it one more time at the NCAA level. But I'm assuming for this discussion that they all decided to go in, because that's kind of obviously makes or breaks a draft. That's why maybe to trade for the firsts, in the dynasty in season, when that these guys have declared, that might pile into why you want to wait a few months to go after your first. But anywho, let's talk about the class. It has a number of QBs that could be taken in the first and second round. There's a few additional quarterbacks that we could see in the day 3 guys selected, that it would be an injury away from playing. I mean, we had to rely. We used Tim Boyle, DTR, all these quarterbacks we've used in fantasy this year. Josh Dobbs is like a top 12 option every week. We've seen crazy things happen at quarterback, and I think that there are a number of guys at the quarterback position that could find themselves fantasy relevant through, some chaos, but still later in this draft. So it's a very QB friendly draft, in my opinion. Like I said, I think in our Superflex leagues, we could see a number of them go at the top half of the draft, of our rookie drafts for sure, but also the NFL draft. I could see up to 6 quarterbacks being taken in the first round. I know that would be that's kind of the high end. That's kind of like bold take on it, but I mean, you already know the top 2, Caleb Williams and Drake May, Bo Nix, Michael Penix. We saw both of them play last night. Jaden Daniels has absolutely emerged on the scene. Then you have JJ McCarthy, quarterback from Michigan. If he has a hot playoff, wins a championship, maybe he rides off into the NFL sunset and easily could be a first-round draft selection. So there's a lot of quarterbacks that we're going to want in fantasy, and especially our Superflex leagues. That's why it's important to have firsts. The other real big reason why you need firsts if you are a rebuild is the wide receiver class. Now, the wide receiver class is being hyped, and it could fall a little bit. It could underwhelm a bit. That's just the nature of the beast. But when you look at the studs in this year's class, these are the types of drafts that can reset your franchise like that. I mean, if you had hit on Garrett Williams, Laube, and you'd be like, oh man, I already have 2 top 12 dynasty cornerstone receivers. In years past, they're obviously, getting Jamar Chase and Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith. You were able to put together these franchise changing pillars at the wide receiver position. This class, my friends, has that upside. It has that possibility, because obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. is a generational prospect. He's a guy that went to OSU, not as you may be surprised. I think he was the 13th ranked high school receiver in his class going in OSU, 13 or 14. I want to say, but it was after 10, if I'm not mistaken. But his work ethic, his dad's Marvin Harrison Sr. So the knowledge, the intuition, practices, the insight, all of that has obviously helped develop him into a fantastic route runner, a beast. And they, in an interview, it was last week before the game against Michigan, emphasis on the game, right? That's what it's called. He mentioned, like, what's the difference between you and your dad? He's like, I'm bigger. And the kid's right. Kid's huge. So the wide receiver class highlighted by him, but Malik Nabers, Roma Dunze, we saw him last night go berserk mode. Troy Franklin, unfortunately, he got hurt last night, hurt his shoulder, didn't have a big game, but we've seen him put up over 1,300 receiving yards this year. Xavier Legette is a name to get to know because he could find himself in the early half of the second or the back half of the first round in terms of the NFL draft. So he's going to have some helium. He is going to rise through the ranks. And then we also saw teammate of Roma Dunze play extremely well last night. Jalen McKillen, I believe his name is. Let me go look that up. I want to make sure I get it right because I'm talking about the prospects here. This is the Pac-12 championship, the last ever Pac-12 championship, which is kind of crazy. Yeah, Jalen McMillan. I was right. Sometimes I doubt myself, but he went off for over 100 last night. He's a junior. He'd been early to clear. He had some injuries. I don't see him going in, but again, just the talent upon talent. Keon Coleman, will see him in the ACC championship game today. It's immense. There's so many good players that'll be first-round draft selections, or even early second. They're going to have crazy value, crazy helium, and crazy talent. And over years past, last year in particular, it was like all these guys, man. I mean, 5'8", 5'10", 5'10", 5'9". It's like, wow. Is that the new class of receiver? It's like, yeah, look at Tank Dell. He's doing pretty damn good. Jordan Addison looks like a monster. So, yeah, it's able to get done at this level. Nope, not this class. This class is looking like the Monstars in comparison to the wide receiver position. They are all 6 feet or bigger, 6'1", 6'2", 6'3". I mean, 6'6". I mean, there are big receivers, big, talented, very, very talented receivers. That's why it's very important here in the few months when we get to the Dynasty in season where the trading has opened back up. These rebuilds, you got to get yourself firsts. If you can come away with 2, 3, if you can do 4, I mean, you're talking about a quarterback, 2 receivers, a tight end, perhaps, and you're talking about pillars for your team over the next 5 years. Very, very important. Now, tight end, I alluded to tight end for 2 reasons. 2 reasons right now. And those 2 reasons are Brock Purdy and Jatavian Sanders. I'll talk a little bit more about Sanders in a minute, but Brock Bowers. Did I say Brock Purdy? Whatever. Brock Bowers. This kid is the tight end prospect. We talked about in the future cast, Theo Greminger. Oh, shout out Theo is in the chat. Yes, sir. Happy SEC title game to you as well, Mr. Greminger. But a big fan of Brock Bowers. You'll see him in that SEC championship game, but he's a stud. He is an absolute stud, mega producer at college, mega producer, like 100 percentile production at tight end. Isn't as big as a Kyle Pitts, but I think what is working in his favor. But he's a yak monster. Let me say that. Kyle Pitts, his red flag in the NFL was he was not a yak monster, where Brock Bowers is. He leads the nation, even missing games in yak yards after catch. He's over 400, the only tight end in college to have that number, over 400. He's a stud. And his red flag going into the year was his size. He's only 6'3". Right now he's listed at 240. But in season, he'll probably beef up. He'll probably weigh in at the combine at 6'3", 6'4", 240, 250. But either way, a little bit smaller than your prototypical stud tight end. But here's the thing. What did we see in 2023, people? Laporta was that size. Nasty. Kincaid, that size. Coming on strong here at the end of the 2023 campaign. So I think teams are not on if they were a little hesitant on the size, they're looking at the 2023 landscape and being like, oh yeah, this is probably the new age at the tight end position because we don't need him to block all the time. But Bowers is good all around. He's probably going to be a top 10 pick in the NFL. He's going to be hyped. He is going to be in his value will shoot through the sky because just like Kyle Pitts did, when you look at this, well, it's a game changer at tight end. You need a game changer at a position that's so scarce. Brock Bowers is going to elevate his value because of that. So we're excited about Bowers, but I'm going to talk about Jatavian Sanders because I'm starting to get very excited about the tight end from Texas. And then that leads me to the last position in terms of the overview to the running backs. Running backs were used to being just the focal point of drafts. We saw how excited we were for Bijan and Gibbs this year, 2 first-rounders. I don't see any first rounders when I look at the prospects. It's not that I don't see good prospects, but what I see in terms of the NFL class, I see a lot of quarterbacks, a lot of receivers. I see some tight ends. There are a few edge rushers, and there are 2 or 3, maybe even 4 tackles that will be first round grades. So there's just so much talent in that first round that running backs, I just don't see any of them landing there. But we've seen Braelon Allen, my running back one going into the class as of right now, declare. He's only 19. He's put up massive yard production at Wisconsin. But again, we'll talk about a couple players here in a minute. But the running back class it's good, but it doesn't have superstars. And this is exactly why, if you were here at the top of the show, if you weren't, when I was talking about my strategy going into the Dynasty in season for rookie picks, if I'm a contender, I want those seconds and I want those thirds. And this is exactly why. The running backs in our rookie drafts, if things go as we see them today, obviously they won't, things will change. But as the rookie class begins to, or as our rookie drafts get closer, I think a lot of running backs, first running back off the board, won't be to the end of the first or second. We did the 2024 rookie mock with Cody Carpentier and Theo Greminger in the last episode of the Future Cast. And if I remember correctly, I think one snuck into like pick 11 in the first round. And then there was a couple that went in the round 2. But if I'm a contender, you always want to keep that running back room fresh. You want to keep replenishing at running back. And you can do so in the second and third round in this upcoming rookie class. So if I'm a contender, that's why I want those seconds and I want those thirds. So we went through, that's basically the overview of the fantasy rookie class. But now I want to just talk real quickly about one of, a quarterback that I'm keeping my eyes on and a potential sleeper. And I'll go through all the positions and kind of just give an overview of a couple players. The first kid I want to talk about is someone we saw last night, Bo Nix. Bo Nix is over 6. He's 6'2", about 220. The what I see when I look at Bo Nix, the player comparison that comes to mind is Alex Smith. It's Alex Smith that went first overall out of Utah, the Urban Meyer product a handful of years ago. And you might say to yourself, why would I want a quarterback in my league that was Alex Smith? Because Alex Smith had a long career. Alex Smith, Superflex wasn't that popular back when I was playing, when Alex Smith was being, he was the streamer of the year, finished as a top 5 quarterback in fantasy, I believe, a handful of years ago in the Chiefs. But why I think this comparison works for me is he's not huge, but he's big enough to play in the NFL, 6'2", 220. He's just got sneaky rushing ability. I mean, last night even, he put together a good rushing performance, and you didn't really even notice it. It was just a couple of what do you call it? When you keep it, you don't hand off on a read option, a couple of keepers there. But he's just accurate. He's the most accurate quarterback, I think, in the class. But that might be a little bit due to the system at Oregon and why Oregon, under this regime, is going to be probably the transfer portal, apex spot for quarterbacks, even over Lincoln Riley, who just keeps throwing him into the NFL as round 1 overall picks. I think Oregon, because what we saw at Nix was a very productive freshman over at Auburn, and he was at his dream school. He was a freshman starter, true freshman starter. He was productive in the SEC, and then kind of fell off a little bit, much like if you guys remember last year's class, Tank Bigsby. Tank Bigsby. I've seen it for guys because there's a new Tank in town, baby. Tank Dell. But Tank Bigsby, nasty freshman, kind of fell off, and we're like, where is this going to fall? He ended up being, a third round pick to the Jaguars, and someone that we kind of like over the long term. But anyway, Bo Nix had a similar career in college. Went to Oregon, has now played there for 2 years, but he's coming out seasoned. We'll call these guys, we're not going to call them old because they're still kids, but we're going to call them seasoned. This is his 5th year in the NCAA, but it is his best. 40 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, over 4,000 passing yards. And like I said, he had some sneaky rushing ability, and it looks smooth, kind of like Alex Smith. Remember, Alex Smith had some sneaky rushing ability when he played. So that's why I have a comparison there. My sleeper at the quarterback position, it's Spencer Rattler. Spencer Rattler, if you've watched the Netflix docuseries Quarterback, he was highlighted there when he was in high school, went to Oklahoma and was famously Wally pipped by Caleb Williams. But we're talking about a former, big-time blue chipper prospect coming into college. He's not big, but it's similar size to Bo Nix, 6'1", 217, so pretty similar size, but he's got a good arm. And the reason why I think he can be a sneaky sleeper in fantasy for us is we've seen him improve since he went to South Carolina. And the thing that he improved in most was his decision making, how he was coached, his leadership. Those are things that were questioned even back in the docuseries on Netflix. So the fact that he was able to learn in a key field of his going to call prospect profile it puts him on my radar because I know he's got a good arm. He does have a really, really above average arm. He's going to look great at the combine throwing in those drills. His pro day is going to look really nice because he's got a good arm and he throws a good ball. But I like the fact that he could go, let's call it day 3, not third round, day 3, probably 4th, 5th round. Do kind of, it'll perform at OTAs, look good in the preseason, become that sneaky backup in a spot like Seattle, let's call it. And then he finds his way on the field. That's why I think he's a sleeper in this class. That's why I think this class is special because like I talked about earlier in the episode, there are guys like Spencer Rattler that, that I think is that could be beneficial for our fantasy leagues, our fantasy teams. So that's quarterback. I'm going to go to running back now. We're going to talk about a couple of running backs. I have a super deep sleeper at running back. So we'll get to him in a second, but I want to talk about Braelon Allen because he's declared for the NFL draft. He's young. He's 19. He's a monster of a human being. He has a big frame, 6'2", over 215 pounds. He's a big kid and he's a tough runner from the University of Wisconsin. But I like the fact that he already declared for the draft, which means, these kids can get, they can get advised by a council to see where their draft potential will be. Clearly he got some good news because they haven't even finished their bowl game. He was like, yeah, I'm going to declare. I'm going to go to the draft. 982 rushing yards this year. And what I've liked from Braelon Allen is we've seen him get more proficient in the passing game, which over his 3 years at Wisconsin, and he played as a freshman. I mean, he took over 200 snaps all of his years at the University of Wisconsin. But his passing game, he went from, I got to get this, my computer's, there it is. Only 8 receptions as a freshman that went to 13 and then 28 this year. We saw the yardage go up. And I said 215. It was really just a speaking error. He's right around 250, not 215. 6'2", 250. Beast. His 40 time seems like it'll not blaze at the combine, but if it looks better than, if he could perform better than, people are expecting, given his size, his speed score will be through the roof here, Player Profiler. And I could see him absolutely being the number 1 running back selected in this class, probably round 2. A hot spot. And shout out Cody Carpentier he's in the chat here. He just dropped his mock draft 2.0 over at Roster Watch and also the patreon.com/executives. He had Braelon Allen. I think he had him going to the Cowboys in the 2nd round. I believe it was that pick. I apologize if it wasn't, but I know it was a running back. And the fact that the Cowboys, which does make sense for them to attack the running back position in the draft. Again, that could be a great spot, but we're not going to start speculating on draft spots just yet. This is an overview. This is a chance for us to talk about the players, as an overview. We're not going to dive in deep. You want to get deeper, keep rocking with us, keep checking out, the game plan, the future cast, and then of course, patreon.com/executives. But my super deep sleeper this year is a running back that comes from the University of New Hampshire. Go Wildcats. Up in my neck of the woods, northeast here. Dylan Laube. Laube. 5'10", over 200 pounds, 208. But why he is a sleeper for me. First of all, he's going to the Senior Bowl. Shout out to Jim Nagy and his crew putting together a great 2024 Senior Bowl. It's going to be fantastic. Elite talent Spencer Rattler, I just mentioned, will be down there. Dylan Laube will be down there. So it's going to be a great time down in Mobile, Alabama. Shout out to Jim Nagy in the Senior Bowl. But what I love about Dylan Laube is the fact he's got over 600 rushing yards this year, or over 700 rushing yards, I should say. and he has over 600 receiving yards this year. He's a weapon. They use him out wide a whole bunch. He runs a ton of routes. He's very versatile. I mean, we're talking up to 3 wide receiver snaps a game throughout the season at certain points throughout the season. And that skill set will keep him on an NFL roster. And maybe it's a third down back opportunity. I don't think this kid shoots up the board and becomes like everyone's sleeper. I mean, he will. The nuttiest of us will give him the Christian McCaffrey comp. Look up his highlights. You'll know exactly why. But he does know how to play a little wide receiver. He's got the size, 5'10", 208. Right now he's listed. If you can get that 210, 215 at 5'10", it's not bad. It's not too small. And we're seeing smaller and smaller running backs have success. But again, I don't see him going even probably 5th, 6th round. But with this type of versatility, and we're not talking about Deuce Vaughn. Deuce Vaughn, I love Deuce Vaughn. He was my sleeper going into this time last year, but the size is unmistakable. It's the size. I mean, when you see him run, it's like, oh my God. I've never seen someone that it looks like that Kyler Murray Shrek video that everyone posts. So anyway, I love Deuce Vaughn still. I still hope he finds some more success in the NFL. I'm sure he will. But Dylan Laube's got bigger size than he's bigger. He's a bigger kid, great receiver. For the University of New Hampshire Wildcats. Just keep him in there. And again, he'll be at Moby. He's going to the Senior Bowl. So we will get a good look at this kid. We'll get a chance to see some reps, see how he competes against, obviously, talent that he was not competing against at the University of New Hampshire. Let's go over the receiver real quick. Malik Nabers, I just want to talk about him briefly. In my opinion, he's cemented himself as a wide receiver too. I know some people like Keon Coleman for good reasons. He's bigger. Keon Coleman's big. He's going to be good as first rounder, no doubt. But Malik Nabers, he looks to me like Stephon Diggs. Polished, Rattler, cannot be stopped. And he is a mainstay, or I should say a main reason why Jane Daniels is having such a big season. We're talking about a receiver that has 1,500 receiving yards. He only went under a buck 3 times. In 2 of those games, it was 87 and 89 receiving yards. He was sniffing it. And the only time he was under 70 receiving yards was week 1 against FSU. Good team. But he's in the SEC. He's dominating. Malik Nabers, blue chip prospect at a blue chip wide receiver school, emerging. He's got size, 6 foot, 200. Like I said, Stephon Diggs type of player. In my opinion, when I see him play, that's the type of comparison I see. I see a Stephon Diggs type of player. And it's impossible to not get excited about a kid like that. This is a sleeper I will bring up, and it's a super deep sleeper at receiver. I don't even know if he's going to declare, but it's Luke McCaffrey, Christian McCaffrey's little brother. Former quarterback, found his way over to the University of Rice, 6'2", 195, bit of a string bean, but I mean, he's going to be working out with Christian McCaffrey. He can become 200, 205 at 6'2". We like that frame. And the thing about McCaffrey, and yes, I am chasing the legacy, the bloodline, whatever you want to call it. We're talking about a dad that was in the NFL, a running back who was going to go down as one of the best running backs of the era. So yeah, maybe I'm betting a little bit on the bloodline, a little bit on the legacy, but whatever. I'm also betting on the talent. We talked about the frame. First year as a receiver at Rice. 88 targets, 58 receptions, 723 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Had a PFF grade over 75. Pretty good for a first-year receiver. And then this year, he's upped his targets. He's upped his receptions. He's got over almost 1,000 yards, 963 receiving yards, and 12 touchdowns. That's amongst some of the tops in the nation. He is in the same class of touchdown receptions as the Roma Dunsies, Malik Nabers, Troy Franklin, Brian Thomas. I mean, we're talking about the studs. And he's, not playing the same competition as some of these kids. But some of these kids don't have the NFL bloodline that Luke McCaffrey has. So I'm hoping if he comes out that he participates in some of the, the All-Star weeks where he can get seen, get his profile up. Because again, I hope he comes out. I think he'll be a fun player to talk about. And I'm only going to talk about one tight end, Brock Bowers. I talked about him earlier, but I want to also talk about Jatavian Sanders from Texas, because the more and more I dive into it, the more and more I kind of have been looking at the class and how the draft may go. I think Jatavian Sanders could be a first-round NFL draft pick. especially with the Dolphins selecting towards the end of the first round because they love speed and Ja'Tavion Sanders has speed. This is a blue chip prospect. We're talking about a bona fide 5-star. I believe he was the number 1 tight end in his high school class, number 1 or 2 on 24/7 Sports. And he's going to, if he comes out this year, he's going to be, in my opinion, the no doubt number 2 tight end of the class behind Brock Bowers, a generational guy. But he's got the size. He's got the athleticism. He's in a pro-ready offense, doing professional type production. Where he lacks is touchdowns. He only has 1 touchdown, but over 500 receiving yards. And we're going to get to see him in the Big 12 championship game today, the last ever, as Texas and Oklahoma head over to the SEC in 2024. So get a look at Ja'Tavion Sanders because I think this is a tight end that probably won't be a first-round pick in our rookie drafts given the wide receiver and quarterback talent, but I think would be a steal in round 2, looking like, in that Laporta, Michael Mayer range. Kincaid was kind of crept up in the round 1 of our rookie drafts, but I think that Ja'Tavion Sanders provides a whole lot of value. So yeah, we're definitely going to keep that going. And I completely forgot to run the ad. My fault, guys. I forgot to run the ad. I was just in the zone when it comes to the rookie talk, but that's going to wrap up the rookie talk. First, let's hear from Sleeper Fantasy, and then we're going to get into the bargain bin.
This episode is brought to you by Rival Fantasy. Rival Fantasy, the coolest fantasy platform not enough people know about, but they will once I'm done, baby, because they're always innovating. They just rolled out seasonal leagues. We set them up for patrons, for our listeners, and they funded over $1,000 in payouts. That's what Rival's all about. They're always innovating. They already had the fantasy book where you can take overs and unders, stack them up, multiply your payout, but then they added challenges so you can set your own lines and put them out there for the community, and then you can browse the community's lines and say, hey, this guy's crazy, I'm going to take the other side. It's cool. And they have fantasy bingo. Rival Fantasy is reminding me how much fun I can have with fantasy football, and use that promo code PLAYER. The promo code is PLAYER. They give you a $100 instant deposit match plus $25 plus a free play. That promo code is PLAYER for up to $125 in deposit bonus and a free play. You can't beat it.
Matty Kiwoom here. Episode, I don't know where we're at this season, but the latest episode of the game plan. We just talked about some 2024 rookies, but now let's dive into the bargain bin. Get you those players, those sleepers that you need to add in week 13 to get those dubs. At quarterback, let's talk about Bryce Young. The Panthers are at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I have him ranked at quarterback 20. He's only rostered in about 11% of ESPN leagues, in 25% of sleeper leagues. The matchup, let's take a look at it. They're actually getting 5.5 points on the road, the Panthers. So there could be a little bit of cleanup mode, some garbage time perhaps. We like that. But we don't like the 36.5 over-under, second lowest on the slate, which probably means that Vegas doesn't project a slugfest. But again, you can be down 17-3 going into the late third and just have garbage time, and hit the under and still get the production from Bryce Young, or they could just smash the over-under. It's just here for reference, and it ain't a golden rule, because at the end of the day, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is a good matchup for opposing quarterbacks. They've given up 3,152 passing yards. That's the third most in the NFL. They've actually given up 5 rushing touchdowns to quarterbacks. That's tied for the most in the league. Bryce Young hasn't run a lot, but he is capable of running. So I do think that if at the end of the day, if the opportunities do arise from the scamper on down the field, Bryce Young, run a 4.63, 40, 89th percentile, can get it done with his legs. So, I think he could run, and especially new quarterback vibe, we want to call it, quarterback room. There's no Frank Reich there anymore, but we'll talk about that in a second. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, though, this is why we want Bryce Young. It's not necessarily the stats, because if I'm being honest, there's not a whole lot, whether it be in the surface stat department, the recent stat department, or the underlying performance metric department. There's really not a whole lot to be excited about when it comes to Bryce Young. But the matchup is a thing we can exploit here in the bargain bin. The Buccaneers have surrendered 2.5 points more than league average. That's a 4th highest in that metric. And they've given up the 4th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. Like I mentioned, Frank Reich is no longer there. Maybe brings a spark to the offense. Yeah, maybe brings a spark to the offense here. That's what I'm hoping for, a spark. At running back, we're getting real deep here. We're going with Michael Carter against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm at running back 47, so this is a deep, deep play. Rostered in only 1% of ESPN leagues, 7% of sleeper leagues, so he's out there. If you are of the most desperate of us for Week 13, the Cardinals, they're getting 6.5 points on the road to Pittsburgh. They're road dogs, but it feels like they're a lock to cover to me. I think this team's better than a near touchdown dog on the road to Pittsburgh. And the 41 over-under is kind of middle of the slate, so Vegas isn't projecting a complete dud. Michael Carter is starting to look a little bit better here. And then when you look at Pittsburgh's matchup, it's middle of the road, 15th against fantasy points, so running back. So it's not overly exciting, but it's not a tough one. And in his debut, he's played one game with the Cardinals. Remember, they claimed him on waivers. He had 8 touches, 4 of them being receptions. We love that for PPR. 34 total yards. So we're talking about 7.4 fantasy points. He did have a red zone carry. And then he did all that on only a 38% snap share. Maybe that goes up a little bit. They give him similar touches. Finds the end zone. Again, we're talking about bargain bin players. We're not talking about the elite of the elite. Michael Carter, he might be in a few of my lineups in my most desperate. So I'm going to go with Michael Carter here in the bargain bin at running back. At wide receiver, I'm going to stick to what I've already talked about. Panthers at Tampa Bay. I'm going to go Jonathan Mingo at the bargain bin. I got him at wide receiver 38. Some do have him higher. I've seen him, knocking on the top 30 door on some rankings. And I think it's for good reason. He's still only rostered about 11% of ESPN, 17% of sleepers, so he's out there. Tampa Bay, the matchup versus the Panthers, I just talked about it, 5.5 point spread, 36.5 over under. So I talked about that's not great, but again, you could produce in a crappier game, especially in PPR, because again, the matchup is nice. And this is the first time the two are playing each other this year. So this is the Bryce Young's first look at a defense that has been shredded by multiple rookies already this season. Maybe Bryce Young could be one, and if he is one, Jonathan Mingo might be that guy, as we see again a regime change at the top of the coaching staff. Philosophies may change. They want to see what they have in a Mingo as they head into the last part of the season. And the kid has played a ton so far. So it's just a matter of giving him more looks. He's at 90+ percent snap share since week 6. In that same span, he's had a 90+% route participation rate in every single game. So he's on the field. Excuse me. He's had, he's had 6 or more targets in the last 3. So they are trying to give the kid some looks. Last week, he was 4 receptions, 60 yards against Tennessee, which was a soft matchup. And like I said, this is a soft matchup, the Buccaneers. Second most receiving yards allowed to wide receivers. They give up the 4th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers, and they are dealing with some injuries. So we might see their second and third stringers have to move up. Their fourth stringers have to play more, and that could be good for Jonathan Mingo. The only thing I have to say, Mr. Mingo, when you catch the ball at the hash mark, just put your feet down. Don't somehow let your momentum take you 6 yards into the end zone and have it be an incomplete pass. That was one of the most insane things I've ever seen in my entire life. So Jonathan Mingo, fix that and help out Bryce Young, because I'm going with the bargain bin stack. Hit the alarm, baby. Boom, boom, boom. Bargain bin stack. Last guy I'm going to talk about is the tight end for the Tennessee Titans, Chig Okonkwo. He's only rostered about 24% of ESPN, 29% of sleeper. The matchup is essentially a pick'em. The Titans are actually getting a point at home against the Indianapolis Colts. The 42.5 over-unders is the middle of the slate. So, again, some projectable points there. But, tight end, we'll take what we can get. It's tight end. And what we got is a good matchup. The Colts have given up the 9th most receiving yards to opposing tight ends and the 7th most fantasy points to the position. Okonkwo has started to come on a little bit more as of late. His most recent game against the Panthers, he had 4 receptions on 5 targets, 45 yards, 8.5 fantasy points, tight end 13 on the week. I got him at tight end 15, so I think there is room for a little bit of improvement. He did see a red zone target. He's now gotten 2 red zone targets in the last 3 games. No touchdowns. This week he finds a little pay dirt, goes for the same, call it 4 for 50. That's a top 8 week at tight end. So I like what I'm seeing from Mr. Chig Okonkwo. The signs are there for him to be the bargain bin tight end of the week. So to wrap up the bargain bin, we have Bryce Young at Tampa Bay, Michael Carter at Pittsburgh, Jonathan Mingo at Tampa Bay, and Chig Okonkwo home against the Indianapolis Colts. Got to give a quick shout out to the Dominator of the show here at Player Profiler. Bradley Stalder and Billy Muzio are been doing the lineup lockdowns every Saturday night. So you're tuning into the game plan now. Check out the Dominator late tonight as they help you, just dot the I's and cross the T's going into week 13. Before we get out of here, there are some questions in the chat. Jason asks, who is the fastest wide receiver in the class? And Cody has an answer for him. He said the fastest player in the wide receiver class just went 60 in the Big 12 title game. He's talking about Xavier Worthy. He does look like he will probably be amongst the fastest in the class. He's got all the traits that we love of Hollywood Brown, but unfortunately, Xavier Worthy does have a few of the bad traits, the dropsies. But again, tantalizing prospect, one that I didn't even mention before, but could also see a first-round draft selection. So, that's the fastest wide receiver in the class, Jason. Here we go. Franz in a 10-team start 11 Superflex. Would you ship Fields and his own 2021st, currently in 6th, to make the playoffs for Kyler Murray? No, I would not. Because I don't think Murray gives you an overwhelming advantage over Fields. I know Fields has a bye week this week, but feel that you don't want to trade a potential top 6 pick from this draft. No, you don't want to do that. You can you could still look to win now and keep Fields in your pick. So I'd go ahead, do that for sure, in my opinion. Last question here from Jesse Driscoll. Roschon Johnson is a good stash for fantasy playoffs. Also, do you think that Kansas City and Eagles can get me by in the playoffs? If you want to get some really deep playoff analysis, head over to patreon.com/executives. I got the do or die score on there, the playoff battle score, and the buy adjusted playoff battle score on the executive Patreon. That'll give you a really in-depth look at that. But Jesse, I'll still answer your question. I do not think Roschon is going to be a good stash going to the fantasy playoffs. They have a tough playoff schedule, and they come out of the bye. And their first 2 matchups out of the bye, I believe, are Cleveland and is it Philly? It's 2 of the tougher running back matchups in all of football. So I don't think he is a good stash in redraft for the playoffs. And Eagles and Chiefs, they have it's not, I wouldn't say a tough schedule. It's kind of middle of the road, but they're studs. You play your studs, and sometimes tough matchups on paper end up being shootouts, because the reason why they're tough matchups on paper is because they're really good teams, and really good teams can sometimes get into slugfests. I mean, the Bills and the Eagles both have good defenses, and we loved what we saw in fantasy in a rainy game in week 12. So I'm definitely going to be leaning on Eagles and Chiefs. They're going to be the guys that got me to the dance. I'm going to rely on them when I'm in the big dance. And that is going to be today's show. I'm Matty Kiwoom. You can find me on X at Matty Kiwoom. Make sure you're subscribed to the Player Profile YouTube channel. Like this video. And if you like the cut of my jib, you like my content, you can check me out here every Saturday on the game plan. You can find me on Trade Gods every other Wednesday with my man, Jason Allwine. You can catch me on the Future Cast with Theo Garaminger, and you can catch me 2 or 3 times a week with my homie, my boy, my ace, Cody Carpentier, over at the Executives of Fantasy Football YouTube channel. We got the Hurdle Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and then the Sunday Football Watch Along. Again, can't keep plugging this stuff. We got a lot of good stuff going on at patreon.com/executives. Check all that out. Head on over to playerprofiler.com. Get that all in package here. We got the discounts. Use Matty to get an additional discount. Get all the great tools that we have here. The DFS Dominator, Dynasty Deluxe, Player Rankers. You're going to want these. You're going to want these tools here for the last few weeks. Make some coin. And then you're going to want all the Dynasty stuff for the offseason. We got a whole lot coming out. Can't wait to unveil all that to you here in the offseason, or as we call here, Player Profile, the Dynasty in season. So just make sure you're hitting up all that stuff here at playerprofile.com. Check out me everywhere you can. But guys, we're getting to the nitty gritty. We're getting to the fantasy playoffs. We're almost there. So keep game planning, my friends, and I will see you next week. Peace.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you, allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.